Julie Gunlock, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And my pleasure. So today is Veto Override Day in the Virginia legislature. And I am hoping, I don't know how likely it is, but I am hoping that the legislature will, in fact, override one of Governor McAuliffe's vetoes. This is a bill, Julie, that would allow someone, if they take out an order of protection against somebody, someone's stalking them, someone's threatening them, harassing them, when they take out that order of protection, they can then carry a firearm, a concealed firearm, for 45 days while they're going through the concealed carry application process. And there was companion legislation that would have provided some funding for the concealed carry training for people in those positions, because the idea is, if you've taken out an order of protection, at the end of the day, that's not a suit of armor, that's a piece of paper.
Right.
And if you really want to be able to protect yourself, you should be able to protect yourself. Terry McAuliffe said no, Julie.
Of course.
Women and men who are in that position should not be able to make that choice to protect themselves. Just, go to the back of the line at the county, court and wait your turn for your concealed carry license.
Yeah, I find it just so appalling. I mean, you look at who are the vast majority of people who are requesting these protection orders, and it's probably women. So, of course, the feminists, I'm sure, will be silent on this. But this is a women's issue. This is, and I don't mean to say that other people don't issue or need these protections, but this is probably the vast majority of these protection orders are probably against women who are dealing with spousal abuse or some sort of relationship abuse, and are really trying to protect themselves. And as many of the gun rights activists, Kimberly Corbin and others, have said, it is the great equalizer. Men are often much more powerful, stronger than women. And so having a firearm is the great equalizer. And Terry McAuliffe has taken away one of the tools that women use to protect themselves. It's absolutely enraging. And I hope some women's groups, which I know this is probably unlikely, but I hope they speak out against this.
Well, unfortunately, so gun control activists have made it a campaign to tell women you don't want to own a gun anyway.
Right.
Like, really, and it's if you're told, if you even have that thought of maybe I want to be able to protect myself, that's just the evil gun lobby marketing to you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their argument.
Well, what's
in Indiana, though? Well, I was just going to say, in Indiana, there was an article in the Journal-Gazette, and it's by Dawn Hillier, who had a stalker. For 6 years, she said. She lived in fear of this guy. She said, it wasn't until the death threats began that I knew I had to take matters into my own hand. I got a gun. Indiana law allowed me to have it in my home for protection, but I couldn't take it with me outside my home without a state handgun permit. She said it generally takes about 60 days to get a handgun permit in Indiana, but mine took longer, and I've heard of cases where it takes months to process. She says that's unacceptable for victims of stalkers or domestic abusers. They need more than just a piece of paper to protect themselves. Now, look, if you... Go ahead.
No, but I mean, in Indiana, what do they want them to do? Stay indoors? Stay in their house, lock themselves in their house for 2 months? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, you're really keeping these women prisoners. You are actually on the side of the stalker if you're not allowing these women to leave their house with some sort of protection.
Well, and again, the anti-gun advocates would say you have a whistle. Maybe you could have a taser. Maybe you could have mace if you
get close enough.
But they don't want you to have a gun.
Right.
Dawn Hillier says she heard last month a gun control advocate tell lawmakers that victims shouldn't be able to defend themselves. Laura Berry of the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence described self-defense as vigilantism. Hillier says. Berry cited a study widely used by gun control groups funded by New York billionaire Michael Bloomberg. The group claims victims of domestic abuse are 5 times more likely to die in domestic violence situations when a gun is present. Don Hillier said what they don't tell you is that the study relies on what they call a knowledgeable proxy to answer questions about the deceased woman's killer, such as did your husband do drugs, abuse alcohol, or have access to a gun? Was he employed? She says self-reporting for studies is notoriously unreliable, but asking a knowledgeable proxy, whatever that is even more absurd and unreliable. And Dawn Hillier says, at the end of the day, it's up to me to decide how I want to protect myself.
Right.
And it is a reasonable decision to say, you know what, my life's being threatened right now. I do want a gun. I have that gun in my home for self-defense, and I would like to take that gun with me. Now, I'm willing to apply for the proper permits, but that's going to take time. And in the meantime, as you say, Julie, I would like to be able to leave my house. I would like to be able to try to go to work, provide a paycheck for my family. If we're talking about people who filed orders of protection, if we're talking about people who have perhaps left an abusive spouse, they probably don't have a huge nest egg. They probably need to be able to leave the house, to try to go to work, to try to build up some sort of normalcy. And we're telling them, no. It's bizarre to me that this is even controversial. I know the phrase common sense gets thrown around a lot these days, but to me, this is real, true common sense legislation.
Yeah, and Terry McAuliffe's actions are anti-woman. And again, because so many of the people who are filing for these protections are women. Now, what's interesting, Cam, is that I don't know if you have been watching HBO these last several weeks. There has been a show called Big Little Lies on HBO, and I can say the spoiler because the last of the series, I think it was an 7 or 8 part series, was shown on Sunday. So sorry, but if you haven't watched it, but there is a spousal abuse situation between these stars, or between the two of the sort of main characters. And it's interesting. This is, of course, set off a bunch of profiles and people and other entertainment pop culture sites about spousal abuse. Peter Sarsgaard, who plays the abusive husband, talked about how he was glad to be able to play a husband that didn't fit the stereotypical, I guess, sort of poor, uneducated, thug who's beating up his wife. Because in Big Little Lies, it's very well-off couples, and so it's headed off this this sort of conversation. Let's talk about this important issue, and it's interesting that they never talk about these women being able to defend themselves. Yet in the movie, one of the women is a rape victim, not the wife, but another character is a rape victim, and she carries a gun with her at all times because she feels safer and more protected by having this firearm with her. So it's interesting that you can have these really well-meaning conversations about spousal abuse, and yet at the same time you can have a governor who is working to limit women's ability to protect themselves. Again, there's so much, we need to soul search about this issue. And yet when it comes to solutions, you have a very powerful governor who's willing to really put women in harm's way. That's really scary.
Well, again, I hope that lawmakers are able to overturn this veto, but yeah, you're right.
Maybe they should watch Big Little Lies.
That's what we have right now.
Maybe they should watch Big Little Lies. Maybe they'll start to feel.
Well, I think the veto override session's today, so I don't think they could take a timeout and sit and watch TV. I imagine a lot of voters probably wouldn't get what they're trying to do. No, seriously, there's a point to us binge watching this. We promise. Probably wouldn't.
Yeah, maybe not.
Probably wouldn't go over too well.
Maybe not.
Yeah, probably not. All right. Now, one other thing that I wanted to talk with you about. So help me out here and remind me if I don't think we've talked about this before, but Cargill. Coming out. I've been paying attention.
Did you see my
Julie.
tweets?
I've been paying attention.
Yes.
I have seen a couple of your tweets. Yes.
Little angry.
So this is fascinating to me because we've talked about the whole GMO thing before.
Yep.
And I noticed on my Twitter feed last week, all of a sudden people were very angry at Cargill for some reason.
Yeah.
And it was because Cargill, which is a big ag company, came out and said, hey, we're working with, what's the organization?
The
Julie?
Non-GMO Project. I mean, the name says it all. The Non-GMO Project. Which is
we're working with the Non-GMO Project.
Which is an anti-GMO organization that spreads the most ridiculous falsehoods and lies and myths about GMOs, harming you, harming people, harming farm animals. They are about as radical a non-GMO organization. There are lots of non-GMO activist organizations. There are lots of activist organizations, period. Most of these non-GMO organizations are somehow tied to the environmental movement. But non-GMO is really this sort of standalone anti-GMO activist group that was it's interesting. They began what they call a verification process, where they will, if a company wants to verify to its consumers that its product is non-GMO, they send it off to the Non-GMO project, pay them. The Non-GMO project with being paid to do this will test it, and then if it's non-GMO, they'll put this little label on there. It's a butterfly on the on the packaging. Of course, it is on the packaging, and that signifies that it's verified non-GMO. And of course, it's verified by this Non-GMO project. Now, Cargill claims that it has consumer. They are not a direct-to-consumer. They don't. You don't go to the Cargill store. You don't go to the store and go, "Oh, I'm going to purchase this Cargill item." But they provide other like manufacturers with things like corn, unprocessed corn, and they buy a ton of GMO corn. And so Cargill decided that they've heard from all these consumers, which I don't really get, that they want non-GMO verified products. So they decided to partner with Non-GMO Project. Now, this is the thing. They also bragged about it on Twitter. And you've got 90% of the corn grown in this country around there. I think it's higher than 90%, but it's around 90% of the corn grown in this country is non-GMO. And Cargill largely uses non-GMO or purchases non-GMO, or rather GMO corn. And so it's so strange that they did this to partner with an organization that is slamming the very farmers that Cargill works with, rather.
Well, and then they sort of tried to have it both ways and came out and said, but wait. No, listen, we're not saying that we don't like a GMO foods, right? We love GMO foods, but we're just working with this group that's trying to eradicate them, and trying to have it both ways. And it was funny. I thought about Cargill last night when the whole Pepsi commercial blew up, and and what an awful commercial that was. Because here, once again, it seems to me you have these gigantic corporations trying to virtue signal, and doing so in an extraordinarily poor way, right?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I've been seeing so many mistakes now from food corporations in particular, trying to sort of, like you say, virtue signal. I think it was Skittles. Is it Skittles that? I don't know. Some social justice message released Skittles with no color. They're all white. Is this right? I feel like this is right. And then
I feel like this is like a fake Facebook
no. And then people got mad because it was like somehow racist. Like it was all white. It wasn't. So you can't win. The point is that no matter what, someone's going to get mad. And so don't do it. Just don't dabble in politics and in these social justice causes. Just stay out of it. And the food industry has been doing this more and more, but with Cargill in particular. Yes, Cargill actually tweeted me back and was saying, look, we're just trying to respond to consumer demand. I'm not really sure who those consumers are. But they forgot that they are also a customer. Cargill buys corn from farmers. And let me tell you, on Twitter, Cargill got beat up pretty bad. There was one farmer who said, just happily drove 80 miles out of my way so that I didn't have to sell my corn to a Cargill silo. That's significant. And that was all over Twitter. And so I think Cargill was really shocked by the reaction. And, which again is just astonishing to me that they don't think that there's going to be some sort of reaction when they partner with an organization. And let me tell you, the Non-GMO Project has said they want to see the end of biotechnology. They want to limit farmers' ability to use GMO seed. That's serious to farmers. That could destroy their farms. And so it was a very bad business decision. I think it's great when businesses respond to consumer demand, but when you're a business that also relies on other partnerships, you've got to remember those other partnerships and respect them. Cargill didn't. So they're getting beat up, and they need to walk it back, and they need to apologize to the farmers they insulted.
Absolutely. Julie, listen, I appreciate you coming on the program. It is always good talking with you.
Always great talking to you. Thank you. I always feel like I've just vented my spleen when I come on the show, and I feel much better. My husband really thanks you. He says I'm much easier to deal with.
Glad we can help. The therapy is free. We won't even charge you. I think we might even comp you for parking.
Good.
Julie Gundlach, you can find her at iwf.org, and you can also see her weekly here on Cam & Company.